Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees.
And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership.
Episode 176, Amy Bock, Part 2. So on the 23rd of May 1884 in the Melbourne Argus, it outlines the details of the case. Alleged fraud by a state school teacher. For many months past, several city firms have, it is alleged, been put into considerable inconvenience by the dealings of a woman describing herself as Amy M. Bock, teacher of State School number 2382, Murrayvale East in Gippsland. On the 25th of March, she went to Mr. J.B. Way, a jeweller of Goldsmiths Hall, Burke Street East, and presented a letter purporting to have been written by her sister in Maryvale, Gippsland, obtained 2 watches valued at about £50 on approval. The letter stated that Mr. Bock, her brother, had been appointed successor to Mr. A. Keith Agnew as secretary to the Morwell Football Club, and £21 7 shillings and 6 had been raised by a subscription for a presentation to him. It asked that Miss Amy Bock would select a watch and send it down to be presented to Mr. Bock. Mr. Way naturally considered the story of Miss Bock a genuine one and supplied her with 2 watches on approval, but as he never heard any more concerning his property, he made inquiries and found that there was not a scintilla of truth in the woman's statement, nor were there any such persons in the district as some that she mentioned. Mr. Way instructed Mr. Daly, a solicitor, to proceed against Miss Bock by summons, which he did, but when called on at the City Police Court yesterday, she did not appear. A warrant has been issued for her arrest for disobeying the summons. On inquiries being made, it is found that Miss Bock has had extensive transactions with numerous firms in Melbourne, notably Stevenson and Elliott of King Street and the City Carriage Company of Smith Street, Fitzroy, both carriage manufacturers from whom she obtained vehicles on credit. One of these she sent to Geelong and sold it there. Another was forwarded to her at Maryvale, but she sent it up the line again to Warragul, where she sold it. On the strength of her position as a servant of the Education Department, she obtained considerable credit at many establishments. All of her creditors hold large packages of pleading letters, which they have received from time to time in answer to demands for payment of their accounts. It is a remarkable coincidence that in 2 cases, letters were received by interested firms signed Ethel Bock, stating that her sister Amy had died. One of these letters was dated the 14th of July 1883 and another the 31st of March 1884. In both cases, however, the falsity of these communications was proved within a very few days by the receipt of letters from Amy Bock herself. Judging from the letters received by her creditors, it seems that her salary is being collected for the past 6 months. What has become of the proceeds of the sale of the articles she purchased? A piano, buggies, furniture, etc. It is a mystery which the police will doubtless clear up. A meeting of her creditors was held at 71 Flinders Lane on the 4th of February, and at it her estate was assigned to be one of them for distribution. Mr. Way intends to prosecute the offender, and the police will doubtless be in communication with her in a few days. So 3 days later, the latest from Melbourne, Miss Bock at the police court. Miss Amy Bock was brought up at the City Police Court this morning and charged with obtaining goods to the value of £40 from Mr. Way by false pretences. She is 22 or 23 years of age and of unassuming appearance. When placed in the dock, she appeared to feel her position keenly and hung down her head. On the application of Mr. Maddock, who appeared for the accused, she was remanded till Friday in order to be examined by Dr. Shields, as some doubt exists to her saneness. Bar was allowed with 2 sureties of £50 each and herself £50. And 2 days later in the Gippsland Times, the trouble which has overtaken the unfortunate young lady Amy Bock will surprise no one who knew her as a resident for sale for many years. She was always strange in her manner from earliest childhood, and most impatient, indeed at times quite uncontrollable. She had a perfect mania for what is called shopping, which consisted of her ordering goods that she did not require and could not pay for. On all hands, astonishment expressed that the girl has thus far contrived to keep out of the lunatic asylum of which her mother was confined for many years. And another one says, the case of the teacher Amy Bock has been dealt with as far as the Education Department is concerned by superseding her and sending another teacher to take her place at Maryvale. It is not intended to finally decide what shall be done until the cases which are heard in the police court are disposed of. So in the end, she was discharged without conviction, but she was bound on a pledge of good behaviour for 12 months. However, on the 5th of June 1884, the case of the City Carriage Company came up. Among the many peculiar frauds of which she is accused of may be mentioned that of obtaining 2 buggies worth £70 from the City Carriage Company and selling them directly afterwards for much less than their value for ready cash. One of these vehicles was got back by the company upon paying £19 to the purchaser at Dandenong. Another handsome and expensive carriage was ordered by Miss Bock from Stevenson and Elliott of King Street, and this vehicle has been returned to the firm. Mr. Hanks Grocer of Burke Street and the firm of James McEwen and Company, ironmongers of the city, are among the Melbourne creditors, but the sum of her indebtedness in each case is not large. She was brought up to the court on Saturday and, being evidently very ill, was remanded. And a week later, Miss Amy Bock, the young state school teacher whose eccentricities in regard to obtaining from 2 confiding state tradesmen carriages, jewellery and other articles of miscellaneous character, for which she has no means of paying, has recently brought her into contact with the criminal authorities. She is endeavouring to obtain reinstalment in the position that she occupied at Maryvale School previously, notwithstanding the fact that after Miss Bock's discharge by the city bench, it was stated that she was about to leave the colony, and an application was received from her at the Education Department this morning asking that she might be restored to her old position. The request has not yet come before the Minister, but it is scarcely necessary to add that it will not have the support of the officers of the department. Her father suggested that she move to Auckland, New Zealand, where he was living with his second wife. But it seems that living with her stepmother proved to be difficult. So she found work as a governess at Otahuhu. This position was proven to be short-lived. After a few weeks of employment, her first court appearance took place in New Zealand in May 1885 before the Auckland Police Court, where she was charged with obtaining £1 and concert tickets by false representations by using her employer's identity. She appeared in court and she tearfully confessed all, and she was let off by the judge. The court decided that she was not responsible for her actions and was discharged into the care of a local storekeeper. She's now going by Amy Morton. And a little more detail on this case. False pretences. Amy Morton, alias Amy Bock, who appeared to feel her position keenly, was charged with obtaining £1 and 12 shillings in tickets from the Reverend Lloyd Keating by false pretences on the 4th of May. Sergeant Pratt applied for a remand to Thursday, as the arrest had only been made the previous evening and a witness was required. The Reverend Lloyd Keating was in court and was permitted to make a statement and said that he'd only brought the case as a warning to such persons as the accused. He had no desire to press it and would withdraw the charge. Sergeant Pratt said that it was necessary that there should be an investigation into the matter, as it was an indictable offence, but it could be brought under the Vagrant Act if the remand was granted. It was remanded till Thursday and bail granted, with the accused of her own recognisance of £10 and a surety of £10. So in New Zealand, repeatedly she would find work as a cook, a housekeeper or companion. She would delight her employers with her diligence and charm, but within a few weeks she would become, according to witnesses, oddly excited. By a variety of devious means she would obtain money, usually no more than a few pounds. Sometimes she pawned her employer's property, but more often she invented intricate fictions. She would act the part of a concerned friend, a dutiful sister, or a distressed gentlewoman so convincingly that she usually got the cash, whereupon she would disappear while making little attempt to conceal her tracks. In court within a week or two she would weep, she would ask God to forgive her, and the magistrate would be merciful. She would tell the story of her kleptomaniac mother and receive her sentence. So after she received the reprieve in that New Zealand court, she moved to Littleton, where she entered service as a governess to family friends from Victoria who now ran a hotel. 8 months into her new employment, she informed her employers that she'd inherited a large sum of money. When this story was disbelieved, she took offence and resigned. In April 1886, she appeared in the Resident Magistrates Court in Wellington, where she was charged with buying goods on credit in Christchurch and then disappearing. She was remanded to Christchurch and sentenced to 1 month's hard labour at Addington. It says at the Magistrates Court this morning, a young woman named Amy Bock, alias Amy Lang, was charged with obtaining silks and tweeds from G.L. Beath and Company of Christchurch to the value of £7, 9 shillings and 10 pence, with intent to defraud. So this was Bock's first experience in prison, and on her release she moved to Wellington, where she quickly resumed obtaining goods by false pretences. She obtained employment as a matron at the Otaki Maori Boys College, where she used some of her ill-gotten funds to purchase boots for her pupils. She then lived in Wellington, but by July 1887 was back in court on fraud charges. An article titled "A Peculiar Case." Amy Bock was charged yesterday with obtaining goods from William Clark Draper by false representations and was again brought up. Mr. Pownall, for the defence, said that he had decided to enter on behalf of his client a plea. He therefore asked for a remand in order that the accused might be examined by a medical man. She was, he said, suffering from a mania from which her mother had to be placed in the Melbourne lunatic asylum where she died. His worship allowed the case to stand back, but afterwards decided to allow the case to stand over until tomorrow. Meanwhile, the accused was again admitted to bar with a surety of £25. As a result of this second offence through the courts, she was sentenced to 6 months' detention at Caversham Industrial School in Dunedin, where she was so impressed the superintendent with her intelligence and ladylike deportment, he offered her employment as a teacher there. The position came to an abrupt end when she was discovered attempting to engineer her escape by forging letters from an affectionate but, alas, fictitious aunt. In January 1888, she left the school and advertised herself as a music teacher, but by April she was in court again, charged with obtaining goods on false credit, and was sentenced to 2 months' imprisonment, despite requesting that she be admitted to a lunatic asylum and claiming that she had inherited the madness and kleptomania from her mother. The judge hearing the case commented that kleptomania was only another name for stealing. So a detailed article titled "A Clever Imposter, Many Tradespeople Imposed On." At the City Police Court this morning, Amy Maud Bock, a young woman of genteel appearance, was charged with having on the 31st at Kensington, by means of false pretences, obtained from Peter Dutton, chemist, a quantity of smelling salts, perfumery and violet powder, at the value of £1 9 shillings and 6 with intent to defraud. The prisoner pled guilty. From what transpired in evidence and from inquiries subsequently made, we learn that the prisoner was remanded to the Lookout Point Industrial School from Wellington in July last for the space of 6 months under the First Offenders Probation Act. At Wellington, she'd obtained money and goods to a considerable amount by means of false pretences, but the authorities, not knowing that she had previously been convicted of like deceptions in Christchurch, did not oppose the case being dealt with under the First Offenders Act. On the steamer's arrival at Port Chalmers, she was met by the officer in charge there, and to him she told such a plausible story of her unfortunate position that he took her to his house pending the train leaving for Dunedin. Miss Bock, who's an accomplished young woman, soon made herself particularly agreeable to the sergeant's daughter, who subsequently took quite a sisterly interest in her newfound friend. Miss Bock, after being some few months at the industrial school, expressed a wish to write to some of her friends with a view to seeing what could be done for her. It was understood that she'd written to a relative in Waverley, New South Wales, and about a fortnight later a letter from Christchurch was addressed to her at the institution, which after perusing she handed to the master. The letter was as follows: Opua, near Christchurch, 16th of January 1888. Dear Amy, your letter to Waverley was forwarded to me here yesterday. My dear child, I have heard of your troubles from your father when we passed through Auckland. Amy dear, how is it that you had such a grand opportunity of doing well have failed so? I am so disappointed. The Amy I remember was such a generous, noble-hearted, truthful, honest girl. What has caused the change? It is just 4 years ago since you spent the happy Christmas with us, and I have not seen you since. I did not know you had left Auckland till we reached there. I am so sorry for you, and I will help you as far as I am able. You do not know that I am an invalid and a widow. It is almost 2 years since your uncle and I were driving into Toowoomba, and the train started the horses, and we were both thrown out. Your uncle was killed on the spot, and I am left a helpless invalid. So much so that I have to get Bertie to write for me. She's your mamma's secretary. Well, Amy dear, I will tell you what I wish. Then you may please yourself about accepting. Bertie, Vel and I are leaving for England for the next large steamer which goes from Littleton, and we shall probably be 9 or 10 months. If God spares me to return, I would like you, if you can and will, to stay in New Zealand until our return, and then we will see if we can get you something near Mudgee, New South Wales, as this is where we intend to live on our return. Now, if £30 would be of any service to you, I will lend it to you. I say lend, but the loan may extend over many years, and I will make it even £50 if you will promise to pay me in small instalments. You must also promise me to try your utmost to redeem your character and position. If you prefer to use this money to go over to New South Wales now and try yourself with what can be done, well and good. But I think it would be wiser to pay some of your debts with it and wait till I can take you over with me. You would not be so likely to be snubbed. I am told your term expires somewhere about the 14th or 15th. If so, would it be possible for you to run up to Christchurch for a day or two? I would dearly like to have a long talk with you, and I must save my strength for the long journey before me, or else I will come down to Dunedin myself. If you would come up, I would return you the cost of your fare. Say you left on Wednesday next on the 18th, you would reach Christchurch the same night, and I would be able to have a nice chat with you on Thursday as they are all going to Ashburton. At any rate, John Mason and Bertie will drive in to the station that evening in case you may come. We are staying with Mrs. Mason at present. I am glad you have found such a kind friend in Mr. Titchener, and trust you will strive to prove grateful to him. And now, Amy dear, I will stop, for I am tired, and Bertie dear is tired of writing for me, so we will leave the matter for the present. If you cannot come, I will send you a post office order before we leave, and then you must please yourself which course you take. And, oh, Amy, do for the future try for your own sake, for all our sakes, to conquer in the fight. I know you feel your father taking the steps he did, and I am astonished at him, but you shall not be left alone in the world if I can help it, my child. Goodbye, and may God bless you in the prayer of your loving aunt, M. Mary. Mr. Titchener, who had been particularly observant regarding Miss Bock during the time she'd been in the institution, and had noticed that she was somewhat crafty, doubted the genuineness of the letter, but of course did not express these doubts to the girl. To her he confided his opinion that Mrs. Mary was a noble woman, and advised the girl to accept the offer to go up to Christchurch, and even consented to reply in her name, thanking Mrs. Mary, both by telegraph and letter, for her kind offer. The letter and telegram were sent, as undertaken, but the same day saw the following telegram dispatched to Inspector Pender of Christchurch. January 19th, 1888. Inspector Pender, Christchurch. Please ascertain if there's a Mrs. Mason residing at Opua, and if there is a Mrs. Mary from New South Wales staying with her, let it be done quietly. My reason for asking for the information is this. I have a young person by the name of Amy Bock sent to me from Wellington under the First Offenders Act. I'm inclined to think she is trying to carry out a clever dodge to get to Christchurch. Do not let the Masons or the Marys know that inquiries are being made. It is possible Mrs. Mary may be there, but I think it's very doubtful. Enclosed is a copy of the letter which Bock states she has received from Mrs. Mary, but as Miss Bock is adept at letter writing and at the art of deceit, I have grave doubts about it, and am inclined to think she's preparing a plan for action in Christchurch. Please let me know as soon as possible. F. Titchener, Manager. To that the following reply was received. To the Manager of the Industrial School. Mrs. Thomas Mason, Balls Road, is the only person known by that name at Opua. No person named Mary lives with her or is known to her. Several letters and telegrams arrived at her house recently addressed Mrs. Mary and were returned to the post office. Amy Bock was convicted here in April 1886 and sentenced to 1 month for obtaining goods very cleverly by false pretences. She lived at Littleton with a publican who took a great interest in her. On the day that this arrived, Miss Bock sought a private interview with Mr. Titchener for the purpose of extorting from him her fare to Christchurch, and she was taken somewhat aback when Inspector Pender's telegram was read to her. She, however, took in a situation at a moment and admitted that she'd been convicted in Christchurch as mentioned. She further admitted having penned the letter alleged to have come from Opua in the institution, and said that she posted it up to Christchurch and that it was there, copied by an accomplice, whose name, however, was too honourable a thing for her to disclose. Her deception was then brought under the notice of Dr. Hislop, one of the visiting trustees at the Lookout Point institution, and he saw that it would be unwise to detain Miss Bock there, especially as her term of detention under the Probation Act had expired. So she was discharged accordingly, but Mr. Titchener continued to take a lively interest in her. He found her comfortable lodgings and commended her to the kindly attention of the jail chaplain, Mr. Torrance, and paid her board for 3 weeks. The young lady appeared to profit for the attention shown her. She joined the Salvation Army, in which she claimed to be a leading spirit, and generally did what she could to hoodwink those who were anxious for her welfare. But it soon transpired that by means of false pretences, she was getting goods from tradespeople in various parts of the town, and Torrance and Titchener were finding that they could do nothing for her, left her to her own course. For the last few weeks, she had, according to one witness, been living on her wits. The reading of the correspondence published above, which was done by order of the bench, caused great amusement to those in the court, and the laughter was renewed when Mr. Titchener remarked, "She has some excellent testimonials, your worships," in her own handwriting. The bench, after hearing the evidence, said, "We think it's best to adjourn the case for 7 days, so in the meantime the prisoner can be examined by a medical authority as to the state of her mind." The prisoner thanked the court for the course they were adopting and added that the offence must be a mania with her. She could not help herself. In answer to the police, Mr. Titchener assured the court that he had never seen anything wrong with the woman. If she was mad, there must indeed be a method in her madness. And some of the victims, from Mr. C. Bills of George Street, she obtained a bird and a bird cage, representing that she'd been sent there by a gentleman known as Mr. Bills. From Mr. Price, she got some medicines. From the lady with whom she boarded by Mr. Titchener, she got a brooch, which she's failed to account for. And another lady with whom she'd been staying with recently gave her a gold watch to get repaired, but Miss Bock failed to return either the watch or herself. She went to the Dresden piano depot and left some printed cards to the following effect with Mr. Riedel. Miss A. M. Bock, teacher of the pianoforte and singing, terms 1 guinea per quarter, first-class Melbourne testimonials. On her representation, she had some pupils who were paying 3 guineas per quarter in advance. Mr. Riedel sent a piano to her room in a house at Canongate that she'd rented, but he was more fortunate than the others, for the landlady, thinking there was something suspicious in Miss Bock's conduct, refused to receive the instrument. In the case of which she was prosecuted, she paid 2 visits to Mr. Dutton recently and represented that she had been sent for the perfumery and other articles by Mr. Titchener, saying she was a teacher in the institution. It is believed that very many tradespeople have been imposed on by Miss Bock, and had it not been for Mr. Titchener's actions, no doubt others would have received a visit from this very estimable young lady. And on the 11th of May 1888 in the Traralgon Record in Victoria, alleged kleptomania, a remarkable case. The following will be read in interest at Traralgon and Morwell, where the prisoner was well known. At the Otago Police Court on Wednesday, a woman, about 28 years of age, named Amy Maud Bock, was charged and on remand with obtaining on the 2nd of April, by means of false pretences, a quantity of articles from Peter Dutton, a chemist at South Dunedin. The client pleaded guilty and was remanded for the purpose of examination. It was alleged that she was not in a proper state of mind, and she was remanded in order that some inquiries might be made about her. Since then, she had sent for Mr. Kettle, and he had made inquiries with regard to her. It seemed to him to be a very peculiar case indeed, if the statements made were true. He'd taken some trouble to verify them, and so far as he could verify them, they appeared to be true. She had made certain statements to him, and a woman named Mrs. Lees, with whom she'd been living, confirmed those statements. Mr. Phillips, the probation officer, said, "I may state that the surgeon of the jail has seen her on 3 different occasions and does not see any reason to make any entry concerning her." Sergeant Major Bevan informed the bench that the accused had been in jail in Christchurch. Mr. Kettle said that would be the very thing that they might expect to find if the girl's statements were true. He had a statement in her own handwriting, which he would read to the court if permitted to do so. Mr. Kettle then read the following statement. "The malady I suffer from now has been upon me since childhood, and no one but God and myself knows the fearful horror I have to face year after year in the knowledge that, instead of my being able to fight successfully against it, as I have prayed so often to do, it has rather overpowered me more and more. When I was very young, I remember going to a shop in the town we lived and buying a lot of books without my father's knowledge and giving them away. You will see for yourself if you look into the case that nothing I ever got has been for myself. The temptation has always been, give, never mind how you get the things, you can pay for them by and by. Well, when the account was sent to my father, he came to me and told me never to get anything without first receiving an order from him. He told me that anything I needed I must go to him for, and I should have it. But him saying that only seemed to increase the desire to get things without his knowing. I did so many times, and at last, when his patience was worn out, he took me into his room and told me of my mother's fate, and said that he feared I showed the same symptoms. He begged me to fight and struggle against this kleptomania for all our sakes. But it was in vain. It still went on at intervals, though he tried kindness and punishments of all kind. He then decided to send me away to boarding school in Melbourne to a Mrs. James's at Nicholson Street, Fitzroy. There for months I had peace, but it suddenly broke out worse than ever. However, I stayed nearly 2 years, and then my father, having had severe losses, we each had to choose our own work and take to it. I, being passionately fond of children and teaching, chose schoolwork. I studied under Mr. R.L. Clements, now head teacher at Naseby. I passed my examination and was appointed to a school at Stradbroke in Gippsland, Victoria, where I was for 2 years, and from there promoted to Maryvale East, 97 miles from Melbourne, on the railway line from there to Sale. During those 2 years, strange to say, the old temptation scarcely visited me, and when it did, the thought of my work, which I really loved, always had the power to check me. But just about this time, the greatest sorrow of my life came to me. I had become engaged to one whom I'd known since childhood, and he was accidentally killed, being thrown from his pony. However, I went to Maryvale and was there for some years, until a school at Hazelwood, almost 7.5 miles from ours, was made half-time with ours, and I was given charge of the two. I accepted and did well for some time, but the work was too much for a female, besides having to go backwards and forwards to the schools in all weathers. One day I got wet through, and instead of changing my clothes at once, I sat in them for 3 or 4 hours. This resulted in an attack of inflammation of the lungs and bronchitis, and having a relapse, the illness lasted 4.5 months, during which time I was only once out of my bed. I had to resign, and losing my school seemed to just throw me back altogether. I never got strong, and the old temptation came again, and I fell so often that I determined to tell Mr. George Teague of Melbourne of my case and seek his advice. He did all he could and was indeed beneficial to a certain extent. I went to New South Wales to visit an uncle there, and then the malady attacked me again. I got things in his name and gave them to his children, my cousins. When he found out, he was vexed. I told him how it was, and he offered me a place in a private asylum and pay for me if I would go, but I would not. I have regretted it ever since, but I hoped against hope that I might be enabled to battle against it. I went to Melbourne again, and there I suffered fearfully through it. And it had not been that I had many influential friends, I should have been in the same position as I am at present. I was far from strong as regards to bodily health, and the doctors ordered me away either to Tasmania or New Zealand. My father being here, he wired for me to come to Auckland, but my stepmother, being very young and knowing the malady I suffered from, never liked me, and things were made so disagreeable for me that I left home and got a place as a governess at Otahuhu, and there the same old thing occurred. I was arrested, but the magistrate, having proof of my suffering from my mother's disease, decided that I was not responsible and discharged me. On my way up the coast from Melbourne to Auckland, I stayed one night with Mr. and Mrs. Haxall of the Empire Hotel, Lyttelton. They were old friends of ours from Victoria. Mr. Haxall was at one time the proprietor of Mitchell's Terrelgan Hotel, as old residents would remember, says the editor. When I was in Auckland, I heard of her death, and her wish that, if I had not obtained work in Auckland, I would come as a governess to her daughters Eva and Mary. I did so, but had not been there long before I did that, which resulted in my being placed in Addington for a month. I knew then I had no chance of fighting against this terrible evil. It is in my blood, and the only way of being able to prevent myself from being the cause of misery and sorrow to all those connected with me is to write and see if my uncle will do as he offered some years ago, place me in a private asylum where I shall perhaps be treated kindly and yet never allowed to go out alone. Mr. Titchener stated in his evidence that I was living with a publican at Lyttelton. I beg to say that I was not in the way he would have made it appear, but simply as a governess to his 2 daughters. Whatever my life has been, the temptation of bad living, such as he inferred, has not been one of mine. God knows I have evil enough to answer for without that. After leaving Addington, I went to Wellington and was there for some time before I again fell ill. Through the kindness of the Minister of Education, Mr. Habbins, Mr. Wardle and others, who knew that it was my mother's malady again showing itself, I was sent to the industrial school at Caversham instead of jail, and there I was until January last. Since then I have fallen many times in the same way. I know my sin deserves the greatest severity, yet believe me it has been a struggle against, though in vain. If your worships will deal with me as leniently as possible, it is all I ask. It will be better for me and all concerned that I should receive a sentence, and in the meantime I will get someone to write to my uncle and beg him to carry out the offer he made some time ago, and then when my term is over I may go right away to the asylum he knows of. It is a private one, and the keeper is a friend of his own. Therefore, he thought it would be good for me, for I would have certain privileges and be kept out of harm's way. Dr. Burns says it's not a madness. For proof, I refer to my father in Auckland, Mr. Knight of Wellington, and the Superintendent of Yarra Bend. If proof is required of my once being a teacher in Victoria, Mr. R.L. Clements will be able to furnish that. Besides, Mrs. Robert Wilson of George Street perhaps remembers me when she was over in Victoria. Some years ago, when I was at the Merivale School near Morwell, I was boarding with her uncle, Mr. John Thompson. She visited there during that time. She may also possibly remember it, but it is hard to get proof here, for I am a comparative stranger in Dunedin. However, God knows best, and I am quite content to abide by his will. I still hope and pray that he only can will, in his own way and time, free me from this terrible disease which causes me so much misery, and others too through me. Only he knows the horror I have lived in all these years. After reading the above, Mr. Kettle said, "It is a peculiar statement, and it seems to me circumstantial from beginning to end. Of course, if your worships think that there is no necessity for making inquiries into the matter, I cannot say anything further, but I submit as a case that should be inquired into." Sergeant Major Bevan said Mr. Torrance has got her uncle's address. In reply to the bench, Mr. Torrance said that he did not know anything about the accused, but he had the name of her uncle in Sydney, and he had promised to write to him with regard to the statements made by the accused. Mr. Kettle handed the bench a letter written to him privately, which he showed that there was a certain amount of corroboration about the accused statements. After the bench had retired for a few minutes to consider their decision, Mr. Elmer said that they had come to the conclusion that a sentence would be the best thing for the accused. They would make it as light as possible, and if Mr. Kettle could take an interest in the matter, he would have plenty of time to look up the case. The accused would be sentenced to 2 months' imprisonment. The accused then thanked the bench for the sentence which had been passed on her, and she was removed from court. In part 3, I'll continue to go through the misdemeanors that Amy Maud Bock had in New Zealand.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.